There comes a moment when the world can no longer wound you, not because it's softer, but because you are clearer. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Most people never reach that point. They spend their lives reacting, bleeding from invisible cuts, mistaking emotional chaos for depth. But there's a silent transformation that happens when you finally stop identifying with your wounds. The same pain that once broke you becomes a mirror, and when you look into it without flinching, you realize it was never life that hurt you. It was your resistance to what is. When the illusions die of control, of attachment, of victimhood, something ancient and untouchable awakens within you. You stop trying to protect yourself because you see there's nothing left to defend. That is the moment of real freedom. Not indifference, not numbness, but invincibility born from truth. And from that point forward, nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again. 1. Pain stops when attachment dies. Suffering doesn't come from pain itself. It comes from resistance to what is. Every heartbreak, betrayal, or disappointment gains its power not from the act, but from the meaning we attach to it. We hurt not because something ended, but because we believed it shouldn't have. We suffer because we expect permanence in a world built on impermanence. The awakened eventually learn this truth the hard way. Nothing external was ever meant to belong to you. Not the love you lost, not the recognition you chased, not even the image of who you thought you were. All of it was borrowed, temporary, passing through your experience to reveal where you were still clinging to illusion. Attachment is subtle. It hides inside noble intentions. You tell yourself you want peace, but you secretly demand control. You say you want love, but what you're really seeking is security. You chase success not for fulfillment, but to soothe the belief that you're not enough. Every attachment is a silent contract that says, if I lose this, I lose myself. That's where the pain lives, in the if. When awakening begins, life starts taking away the things that you've built your identity upon. It's not punishment, it's purification. The universe strips you of attachments not to make you empty, but to make you real. When you finally stop resisting what's leaving, you begin to see what was trying to enter all along. Peace, clarity, stillness. Pain loses its claws when you no longer demand that life be fair. You stop expecting people to behave a certain way. You stop needing circumstances to look like your fantasy. The energy that once fed your pain transforms into quiet acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean apathy. It means trusting that whatever falls away is clearing space for something more aligned with who you've become. To the ego, this sounds like death. To the soul, it feels like freedom. When you detach, you don't lose your ability to love, you deepen it. Love becomes lighter, freer, unburdened by control. You stop saying, stay with me, and start saying, grow with me, or go in peace. You stop saying, why me? And start whispering, teach me. The same experiences that once destroyed you become teachers in disguise. Carl Jung wrote that what you resist persists. The more tightly you grip the illusion, the more it hurts when it inevitably slips through your fingers. Detachment is not coldness, it's clarity. It's seeing that trying to own anything in this world, people, outcomes, even peace, is like trying to hold smoke. When attachment dies, pain does too. Not because life stops challenging you, but because nothing within you clings to how it should have been. You no longer try to rewrite reality. You stand with it unflinching. And in that surrender, you finally understand the freedom you've been chasing was never in what you could keep. It was in what you could release. 2. You were never hurt. Only your illusions were. What if the part of you that claims to be broken isn't really you at all? What if the pain you've carried for years doesn't belong to your true nature, but to the identity you built to survive? This is one of the hardest spiritual truths to accept, not because it's complicated, but because it dismantles the foundation of our suffering. The you that feels hurt is the same you that believes it was in control. It's the self made of stories, who you are, what you deserve, how life should unfold. Every wound threatens that image, not your essence. When someone rejects you, it's not your soul that's injured, it's the persona that depended on being chosen. When life collapses, it's not consciousness that shatters. It's the illusion that you were ever separate from what's unfolding. Pain doesn't destroy truth. It destroys everything that isn't truth. That's why awakening often feels violent. The dismantling of illusion is not gentle. The false self resists death with everything it has because it believes it is you. It says, "How could they do this to me?" It screams, "This shouldn't have happened." But beneath all those cries lies something quieter, a witnessing awareness untouched by the chaos. That stillness is who you really are. You are not the one being hurt. You are the one seeing the hurt. When Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are," this is what he meant. To awaken is to realize that all your suffering came from identifying with the mask, the roles, the image, the child seeking approval, the partner chasing love, the achiever proving worth. Those identities ache because they were never real. They were costumes for consciousness to play out its lessons. When those masks begin to fall, it feels like loss. But what's really dying is illusion, the belief that peace existed outside of you. The person who betrayed you only wounded your story, not your spirit. The failure you fear only breaks the idea that success could ever define your value. What remains after illusion burns is something unbreakable, pure awareness, silent and whole. To recognize this is not to deny your pain, it's to see through it. You can cry, scream, grieve, and still know that what you are grieving is the collapse of falsehood. You no longer ask, "Why did this happen to me?" but "What part of me believed it could be destroyed?" In that awareness, you begin to heal without trying. Because now, pain has no one to land on. The ego needs stories to survive. Consciousness needs none. The moment you see that your hurt is happening in you, not to you, the cycle of suffering dissolves. The truth is liberating, almost unbearably so. Nothing real can be lost. Nothing true can be harmed. What's been breaking all along was never you. It was your attachment to who you thought you had to be. And that's the paradox. The deeper you awaken, the less you have to protect. The illusion dies screaming, but what's left behind doesn't bleed. It simply watches with quiet compassion as the false self turns to dust. In that stillness, you finally understand you were never hurt. Only the dream of yourself was. 3. The end of victimhood is the birth of power. There comes a moment on the path of awakening when you realize no one is coming to save you. And strangely, that's the most liberating realization of all. For as long as you identify as a victim, you keep your power chained to the past. Every time you replay the story of what they did or how it wasn't fair, you breathe life into your own disempowerment. The ego thrives in that narrative because it keeps you small, righteous, and safe in your pain. But the soul has no interest in being pitied. It's not here to stay wounded. It's here to awaken through the wound. You can't rise while you're still rehearsing your ruin. The mind says they broke me. The soul whispers, they revealed where I was already cracked. That's the difference between living asleep and living awake. The victim clings to the story. The awaken sees the lesson. Victimhood feels comforting at first. It provides identity, validation, and even a sense of purpose. But over time, it becomes poison disguised as safety. You start defining yourself by what was taken, not by what's still possible. And that is how the past wins. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." To awaken is to understand that truth, not intellectually but viscerally. The story of your pain can either imprison you or initiate you. It all depends on whether you keep identifying with the wound or with the awareness watching it. Letting go of victimhood doesn't mean denying the pain. It means refusing to make it your identity. You can acknowledge injustice without letting it define your destiny. You can remember betrayal without needing to relive it. You can hold memory without letting it hold you. Forgiveness then becomes less about moral virtue and more about energetic freedom. It's not about absolving the other. It's about unhooking yourself. When you stop needing apologies to move forward, you stop making your peace dependent on someone else's evolution. This is where true spiritual maturity begins, because in truth, no one has ever really done anything to you. They've only done things for their own level of consciousness. Their actions reflected their pain, their programming, their perception. You just happened to be standing in the crossfire of their unconsciousness. That's not an excuse, it's an explanation. It's how you release yourself from being entangled in their karma. You start to see that pain was never personal. It was ancestral, psychological, energetic, but never personal. And once you see that something profound happens, resentment becomes impossible. Your energy begins to return to you. Every piece of your soul that was scattered across old battles finds its way home. You stop leaking life force through anger. You stop bleeding love through bitterness. What once consumed you now fuels you. The death of victimhood is not a loss, it's a rebirth. You stop saying, "Look what they did to me," and start saying, "Look what I built despite it." You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What was this trying to awaken within me?" When you reach that place, forgiveness is no longer an effort. It's a side effect of clarity. You see through everything, and seeing through it means it can no longer control you. And so, paradoxically, the moment you stop needing justice, you become untouchable. Because no one can take from you what you no longer outsource, your power, your peace, yourself. That is the end of victimhood. And that is where your real life begins. 4. Emotional pain is just resistance in disguise. Most people think pain is caused by what happens to them, but that's not entirely true. Pain doesn't come from experience itself. It comes from resisting the experience. It's the gap between what is and what you wish it was. That's where suffering lives, in the tension of non-acceptance. Emotional pain is the body's rebellion against reality. You replay the event, question the timing, cling to the fantasy that it could have gone differently. You create countless versions of what should have been, and in each one, you suffer a little more. The mind keeps fighting the moment long after it has passed, like a soldier still swinging at ghosts. That is resistance, disguised as pain. Carl Jung understood this when he wrote, "What you resist persists." The emotion doesn't stay because it's powerful. It stays because you're gripping it. You want to move forward, but you also want to stay right. You crave peace, but you won't release your version of how it should have unfolded. So you circle endlessly, not because life won't let you heal, but because you won't let go of your story. And that's the trap. Your story feels like truth, but it's really armor. Pain becomes a shield that keeps you from facing something scarier than the wound itself. The truth. The truth that it's over. The truth that they may never apologize. The truth that you may never understand why it happened. The truth that, despite it all, you are still responsible for your peace. To the ego, acceptance feels like defeat. It screams, "If I let go, it means what happened was okay." But that's not what surrender means. Surrender doesn't justify the event. It just ends your imprisonment within it. Acceptance doesn't mean you agree. It means you stop bleeding from the same cut. Pain wants to teach you something. Every emotion, rage, grief, guilt, heartbreak, arrives as a messenger. But if you reject it, it has no choice but to scream louder. When you finally stop running and allow it to speak, you realize it was never here to punish you. It was here to free you. The moment you stop fighting your pain, you begin to see through it. Grief becomes gratitude for having felt something real. Anger becomes clarity about your boundaries. Fear becomes evidence that you're on the edge of transformation. Everything transmutes when you allow it to. It's not the feeling that hurts, it's your refusal to feel it. The tears you repress harden into tension. The heartbreak you suppress becomes numbness. The pain you avoid builds walls so thick that not even love can get through. But when you turn toward it, when you breathe into the discomfort without judgment or escape, something miraculous happens. The energy moves. What was once unbearable becomes fluid, soft, and alive. The emotion that haunted you becomes information. You don't get rid of it. You integrate it. You begin to see pain as an ally, a divine mechanic of the soul that loosens everything false within you. And that's when freedom begins. Not when everything feels good, but when you no longer need to resist what doesn't. Because beneath the story, beneath the emotion, beneath the ache itself, lies something unbreakable. Presence. Awareness. You. Pain never wanted to destroy you. It only wanted to wake you up. 5. Invincibility is not armor, it's transparency. We spend most of our lives trying to become untouchable. We build walls, perfect personas, craft reputations, and call that strength. But that's not invincibility. That's fear disguised as control. The truth is, what you harden, you imprison. What you open, you free. The awakened eventually discover that true power isn't armor, it's transparency. Invincibility doesn't come from becoming harder. It comes from becoming hollow. When there's nothing rigid inside you, nothing outside can break you. Think of water. It cannot be cut, bruised, or confined. Try to strike it, and your hand meets nothing. It yields, but it never loses itself. It takes any form, yet remains formless. That's what happens when consciousness matures. You stop trying to resist the world and start flowing through it. Most people believe safety lies in defense. They mistake numbness for peace and distance for wisdom. But real peace doesn't come from separation. It comes from transparency, the radical openness to everything life brings. You stop needing to guard your heart because you finally trust that it cannot be stolen. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Transparency is what happens when the unconscious becomes light. When there's no hidden corner within you, no unacknowledged wound, no secret resentment, no buried shame, there's nothing left for darkness to manipulate. People can only hurt what you hide. Life can only wound what you resist. When you face everything, every memory, every shadow, every insecurity, they dissolve into awareness. What was once pain becomes clarity. What was once fear becomes fuel. And in that openness, you become unshakable, not because you can't be touched, but because you can't be stuck. Invincibility, then, isn't a fortress. It's permeability. It's the art of letting everything pass through you without leaving residue. Words no longer pierce because they have nowhere to anchor. Loss no longer destroys because you've stopped defining yourself by what you have. Change no longer terrifies because you've stopped needing permanence. That's the paradox of awakening. The more transparent you become, the less the world can harm you. You stop being a target because there's no target left. And this doesn't make you detached or cold. It makes you profoundly alive. Every emotion, every encounter, every experience flows through you like wind through open hands. You stop clinging to anything, even joy, because you trust its return. You stop fearing pain because you trust its purpose. Transparency isn't emptiness, it's fullness without resistance. It's not about losing passion or care. It's about caring without control, loving without ownership, living without fear of loss. You realize that no insult, betrayal, or ending can ever touch what's real, because what's real in you is infinite. The moment you stop defining yourself by what can be taken, you step into what cannot be broken. That's the spiritual meaning of invincibility. Not that nothing ever hurts, but that pain no longer finds a place to stay. You are no longer the glass that shatters. You are the light passing through it. This is what freedom feels like. Not an escape from the world, but complete immersion in it. Without resistance, without armor, without fear. The final paradox of awakening is this. When you no longer need protection, you discover you were never in danger. There comes a quiet moment after all the storms, when you stop fighting to heal, stop demanding closure, stop trying to prove that you've moved on. The pain softens, not because the past changes, but because you do. You begin to see that nothing and nobody ever truly hurt you, not in the way you thought. They only revealed the parts of you that were still holding on. Every betrayal pointed to an attachment. Every loss pointed to an illusion. Every heartbreak stripped you of what was never meant to define you. And once all that is gone, what remains is something unshakable. Presence, awareness, stillness, the self that was never bruised by words, never abandoned by love, never diminished by time. That's the paradox of awakening. You don't become invincible by armoring yourself. You become invincible by realizing you were never the one who needed protection. The moment you stop identifying with the one who suffers, the suffering ends. You don't transcend the world. You just stop being trapped by it. You stop needing it to be fair, kind, or predictable. You stop demanding that others understand. You simply stand, calm, whole, transparent, and let life flow through you without resistance. And in that effortless state, something divine begins to happen. Not because you're finally healed, but because you finally remember that you were never truly hurt. If this message found you in a moment of reflection, subscribe for more deep mirror-like truths. Comment what part resonated most, not for engagement, but to speak your truth into the collective silence.